Welcome to the Growth Spurt, a weekly AI podcast by the Second Baptist Church of Ann Arbor.
It's great to be here.
So, you recently shared with us a sermon from Dr. Stephen J. Daniels Sr.
Right?
titled Keep It Simple.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really got us thinking about
Yeah.
how we can apply this message in our lives.
Sure.
So for this deep dive, our mission is to, really unpack this idea of
Mm-hmm.
simplifying our communication and commitments. What are the core insights here that we can all benefit from?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, this sermon, it's part of on a larger series at Second Baptist Church.
Okay, yeah.
The Better Communication in 2025 series. It's fascinating to see how this message builds on previous discussions about the power of our words,
Absolutely. I think back to those talks about controlling the tongue.
Yeah.
That image from James, the tongue being like
Yeah.
a flame.
Right.
And also about being intentional with our words, like what we learned from Ephesians.
Yeah.
So this sermon, Keep It Simple, it feels like a natural next step in that journey.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It all comes back to that powerful teaching from Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37, where he talks about not making vows by anything other than a simple affirmation or denial.
And verse 37, it's so striking, just a simple, yes, I will, or no, I won't.
Right.
Anything beyond this is from the evil one.
Mm.
It makes you think about how often we don't operate with that kind of direct honesty.
Right.
So what was Dr. Daniels' take on why that is and how we can change that?
Well, to appreciate the full impact of the message, I think it's important to understand where it fits in the bigger picture.
Okay.
You see, this sermon is part of the church's Year of Better initiative.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that.
And it's not just about communication, it's about growing in all areas of our lives. Discipleship, stewardship relationships, and communication is a key thread throughout all of them.
So it's a really holistic approach.
Exactly. And this specific series on better communication, it's building on those foundational principles laid out earlier in the year. So, recognizing the impact of our words and then learning how to use them more effectively.
So it's all connected. It's all part of this bigger picture.
Exactly. What's so insightful is how Dr. Daniels connects this practical advice about communication back to Jesus's teachings on vows.
Yeah, because that's not something we think about every day.
Right. Well, in Jesus's time, making oaths was actually quite a complex thing.
Oh, really?
There was a belief that if you swore by something other than God, it might carry less weight.
So like there were loopholes in your promises.
Precisely. But Jesus cuts through all that. He says, don't make any vows using earthly or heavenly things as guarantees because ultimately they belong to God. You don't own them.
Okay.
Even swearing by your own head is pointless. You can't even control something as basic as your hair color.
It really emphasizes God's sovereignty over everything.
Exactly. And it takes away any notion that some promises are more important than others based on what you swear by.
And then Jesus boils it down to that core principle.
Yeah.
A simple yes or no is enough.
Exactly. And that brings us to the heart of Dr. Daniels' sermon.
Okay.
This idea of KISS.
Kiss.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Like that.
He observed that we as Christians, as people, tend to overcomplicate things, especially our communication.
And I think we've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to difficult conversations.
Right.
We beat around the bush. We try to avoid saying what we really mean.
Yeah, we hope the message gets across without being direct.
Exactly.
But you know what? That indirectness, as well-intentioned as it might be, it often leads to more confusion and even resentment.
So it can backfire.
It can. And that's why Dr. Daniels emphasizes the importance of clarity and honesty in our communication.
Even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. There's a certain respect that comes from knowing exactly where someone stands.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he's advocating for more straightforward dialogue, even if the message itself is challenging.
Exactly. And to help us achieve this simplicity in our communication, he breaks down this KISS principle into 3 key elements.
Okay, so let's dive into those. What's the first one?
The first is to communicate with authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah. And for our listeners, think about what that truly means in this context.
Okay.
In the sermon, Dr. Daniels defines authenticity as being trustworthy and reliable in our word.
So it's about integrity.
Exactly. When we say yes to something, it should genuinely reflect our intention and ability to follow through.
And when we say no.
Same thing. Our no should be just as reliable.
So it's not a maybe in disguise.
Exactly. We shouldn't have hidden conditions or be thinking, well, maybe later.
That's a good point.
The examples Dr. Daniels shared were so relatable, like not promising to do something with resources that aren't yours.
Yeah, like offering someone a ride in someone else's car without their permission.
Exactly. Or promising to repay a debt with money you don't have.
Right. It's about taking ownership of our commitments.
Exactly. Our word should have weight. We shouldn't need excuses or escape clauses for broken promises.
That makes so much sense.
It's about aligning our words with our actions.
And ensuring that our commitments are rooted in our actual capacity and intention to act.
Precisely.
So that's communicating with authenticity. What's the second key?
The second key is to communicate accurately.
Communicate accurately.
Yeah.
And that seems to tie back to what we were talking about earlier.
You got Jesus teaching about not making vows by things we don't control.
Right. Because we can't guarantee outcomes that aren't within our power.
Exactly. And Dr. Daniels applies this to our everyday yeses and nos.
Yep.
Inaccurate communication, when our words don't match reality or our true intentions, can lead to a lot of pain and negative consequences.
For ourselves and for others.
Right.
And the sermon doesn't shy away from how difficult it can be to say no.
No, it doesn't. It acknowledges that saying no can be hard.
But it emphasizes that no is a complete and valid response.
Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. You don't always have to justify your no or feel obligated to say yes out of pressure or guilt.
It's about setting healthy boundaries.
Exactly.
I love the story about the mortgage loan officer and the Christian no,
Ah, yes, the let me pray on it.
which we all know usually means no.
Right. But it's a polite way of saying it.
And even Dr. Daniels shared his own experience with having to give a direct no to a persistent lawn service.
Those examples really bring it down to earth, don't they?
They do. They show that this principle applies to everyday situations.
Exactly. And the point is that a lack of accurate communication can lead to misunderstandings and disappointment.
People might feel led on or misled.
Exactly. And being clear, even when you're delivering a difficult message, ultimately shows more respect for the other person.
It's about valuing their time and expectations.
Precisely.
So we've talked about communicating with authenticity and accuracy. What's the third key to simple communication?
The third key is to communicate assuredly.
Communicate assuredly. What does that look like?
So assuredly in this context means communicating with a sense of certainty and firmness.
Okay.
It's about the power of a straightforward yes or no without adding unnecessary qualifiers or explanations.
So no beating around the bush.
Exactly. Just
Okay.
a clear and confident yes or no.
I remember Dr. Daniels quoting the King James Version in his sermon.
Oh, yeah.
Let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. It suggests that when we go beyond a simple yes or no, it might stem from a lack of honesty or a desire to manipulate the situation.
That's the idea. Our words should be trustworthy on their own without needing extra layers of justification or hidden agendas.
So it's a call for transparency and integrity in our communication.
Exactly. It challenges us to be more upfront and straightforward in our interactions.
And the sermon really made me think about whether some of the difficulties we face in life come from not being willing to stand firm on our no.
It's a good question, isn't it?
It is. It's tempting to try to please everyone, but that's not always possible or healthy.
And it's not what Jesus is calling us to do.
Right. The sermon makes it clear that Jesus doesn't have a problem with us saying no.
Not at all. The problem arises when we try to avoid saying no, whether through indirect actions or by saying yes and then not following through.
It's about being honest with ourselves and with others.
Exactly. And that ties into the idea of cheerful giving. We should decide in our hearts what we're willing to commit to our time, our resources, our energy, and not do it grudgingly or out of obligation.
A sincere no actually respects our own boundaries.
Exactly. And it allows others to seek help elsewhere or make different plans.
So ultimately, it benefits everyone.
Right. And to wrap things up, Dr. Daniels pointed to Jesus himself as the ultimate example of commitment.
That's beautiful.
It is. He framed Jesus' coming to earth as the ultimate yes.
Wow.
And even in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus faced immense suffering, he still remained committed to his purpose.
That's incredibly powerful.
It is. It shows the depth of his love and sacrifice.
And it challenges us to think about the weight of our own commitments.
Right. Our yeses and nos should matter.
And Dr. Daniels offered those practical takeaways,
Yeah.
like don't write a check that you can't cash.
Yeah.
Meaning
Preach.
don't make promises you can't keep.
Exactly. And that simple but profound reminder, no, is a complete sentence.
It is. You don't always have to over-explain or defend your decisions.
Right. And it's okay to need time to consider a request, but that's different from avoiding a decision or agreeing insincerely.
I loved the final thought in the sermon.
Me too.
It said that sometimes by saying no, we empower others to find different solutions or rely on different resources.
It's a liberating thought, isn't it?
It is. We don't have to be the yes person all the time.
Exactly. So as you've listened to this deep dive, what resonates with you about how you can apply these principles in your own life?
So many great insights. I think what stands out to me is the importance of being intentional with our words
Yeah.
and recognizing that our yeses and nos have real weight
It's a call to live with more integrity and authenticity.
and to simplify our communication
Exactly. To be clear and direct.
and to honor our commitments.
Precisely. So for you listening, in what areas of your life might you benefit from embracing this KISS principle?
That's something to ponder, isn't it?
It is. Where could you simplify your communication and strengthen your commitments?
Great food for thought.
It is. Go in peace, be blessed, and may the joy of Jesus be yours. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.